Hello. Anyone joining me tonight? I know there's a lot of Crafty Gemini Quilt Club members and crafters who are sewing with Cuddle fabric, so I thought I'd give a few of my tips and tricks to help make it easier for you. Hold on a minute. Hey, Lisa. All right, there we go. Hi, everyone. I spent all day cutting Cuddle orders, and my entire studio was covered in Cuddle dust, and it's in my hair and all over my clothes and upstairs. Anyway, so I just wanted to give a few tips. I know people are apprehensive. I am a total Cuddle snob. I will only sew with Shannon Fabrics Cuddle, and that's because wash after wash, Shannon Fabrics holds up. It stays as soft as the day you get it. I know lots of hearts for Shannon Fabrics, right? So that's what I stick with. When I first started sewing, I actually bought some at Joann's. Hi, Courtney. Crafty Gemini did a children's beanbag chair. So I ran to Joann's and got Cuddle fabric there. And yeah, it's definitely not Shannon Fabrics. So since I started with Shannon Fabrics, I have not gone to any other fabric. It's not as hard as it seems. So I wanted to share the tips and tricks I have. The first thing you want to do is always increase your stitch length. And I find starting out with a stitch length of 3 works really well. And your seams generally want to be a 1/2 inch. I found that the wider the seam, the easier it is. So you could go a little bit smaller, but a 1/2 inch or 1/4 inch is way too small for Cuddle. So try and stick with a 1/2 inch or even just a little bit smaller than that. The other thing is you want to use a ballpoint needle, and a new ballpoint needle. That works really well over a universal needle. And let's see, some people wanted to know if you needed a walking foot. You don't. It doesn't require a walking foot, but it does make life easier. If you don't have a walking foot, not sew with Cuddle because you don't. Just sew with what you have. But if you can get a walking foot or have one, definitely try and see what works best for you. And let's see, when you leave an opening to turn, yeah, definitely, yeah, learn to install your walking foot because it makes a huge difference on a lot of different fabrics. When you leave a turning, section of your project to turn it right side out, you don't really need as wide, hey Vanessa, you don't need as wide of an opening. I find even 2 inches is enough because Minky does stretch. So you have some room to play with. Even my big baby blankets, I only leave, a 2-inch gap, and it's plenty. Let's see. Walking foot. All right, I'm going to show you an example because pins are your best. All right, so I have an example of this adorable, look at how cute that is. Shannon Fabrics little owls. So what I do is, like, when I make bibs or blankets or what have you, let's start first with like a quilt. So I set this up as if it was a quilt. Let me give you some more room. All right, so this square is cut exactly to the size I need it to be. Okay, so that's Minky or Cuddle fabric, whatever. And the backing, or the other side of your quilt or blanket or project, leave bigger because Minky Cuddle fabric will shift when you sew. So if you have both pieces cut exactly the same, trust me, by the time you stitch down and you get to the end and it's all stretched out and you realize that you missed sewing on the back of your project. It took me a year before I realized that this is a much better way to sew. So leave one side much longer. I'd say 2 to 3 inches on all sides of your project. And then once you're done sewing, just cut it down to size. And it makes it, you waste a little bit, but it's better to waste than to be frustrated when your two pieces don't line up to stitch together. Now the other example I have here is when I make baby bibs or car seat strap seatbelt covers. I'll actually trace the exact dimension. So this would be like for a car seat strap cover or a bib. I'll actually just trace it and leave both pieces uncut, and then I'll just stitch right on my trace line. Yeah, your project's a little bit bigger because you're now not using that 1/4 inch seam. You know what I mean? Like you would typically trace it and then, you know, line it up so you're sewing with a 1/4 inch seam around your traced area. So you wouldn't have to do that. Just stitch right on your line and then cut it out and you're good. When you pin, you must pin everything. Don't leave gaps, because if you pin as much as I do, your fabric won't shift as much, and that includes pinning the center. Like if you're doing a blanket or a quilt or any project, pin in the center too, because it does shift, it stretches, so this kind of keeps it together better for you. So pins are your best friends. You can use Wonder Clips. If you don't use them, if you don't have any, buy them, because they are awesome, especially for Minky. Yeah, you run into trouble here when your fabric is a little bit bigger. It's not easy to clip, but you can always fold it up or roll it up and then clip it that way, and that'll work too. But I generally, when I do most projects, I pin. Sometimes I use clips, but for Minky, I usually pin just to be on the safe side. And let's see, what other tip did I have I wanted to share? You sew on the line and then cut the excess. Yeah, that's a really good idea. Even with cottons, I do it with all kinds of projects, but with Minky especially, because it shifts. A lot of people are apprehensive about sewing with Cuddle, but you know, if you take your time, use a few tips and tricks that you'll learn from other people who use Cuddle a lot, it really is a great material to work with. It's not as scary as people think it is, you know. It's not too bad. It really isn't. It just takes some getting used to. And I tell people to always practice. You know, get a small piece of Cuddle and just practice, figure out what works best in your machine. You might be better with a 3.5 inch stitch length, or a smaller stitch length that might work for you. So it just depends. And when you do round objects, I find that you don't have to clip your, I clip my corners on my blankets, but you have a little forgiveness because Cuddle does stretch. So you don't have to worry too much about that like cotton. When you make something that needs top stitching, I will also top stitch a 1/2 inch away. If you're going to top stitch and you're going to do a 1/4 inch, I find that the Minky will roll, the seam will actually roll and shift while you're sewing. So to be on the safe side, when you top stitch any of your Minky projects, just keep it at a 1/2 inch and you don't have to worry about that seam rolling away from you. And it gives it a more professional, a nicer look. And usually when I top stitch Minky, I do a 3.5 inch or a 3.5 or 4 stitch length to top stitch, and that works really well. Does anyone have any questions? No questions? Does everyone sew with Minky? Yeah? It's the best. It's awesome. So, yeah, well, I hope my tips and tricks were helpful. You don't sew with Minky? Oh, you gotta. You got to try it. Everyone's got to try it sometime. It really is a great fabric. Oh, and the other thing is the best beginner projects for Minky. A little to test it out. You could even do yeah, charm packs. I actually won some squares. I want to make a bubble quilt, but I haven't done it yet. A rag quilt with Minky. Did it shed? I heard that they shed a lot when you make Minky rag quilts. I haven't tried that yet. A good first project for Minky, do a little blanket for yourself or for a child. Yeah, it sheds a little bit, yeah. You could do something like that, just make a little, you know, maybe 20-inch by 20-inch little blankie. Yeah, receiving blankets are great. I make a lot of those. But I would do something like that where it's just straight seams and you can use it afterward. Oh, and someone else asked me before, what's the difference between Minky and Cuddle? Minky is the embossed with dots. Let me see. I have a few behind me. So Minky is the ones with the dots. And then embossed. Yeah. Minky is always auto-corrected to kinky. Our phones need to learn. Here, let me make it easier. So Minky are typically any of the fabrics that have dots. Embossed are like this is a paisley embossed. It's not a flat fabric. Anything that's flat we call Cuddle fabric. I think Shannon Fabrics calls all their fabric Cuddle, but it's either Minky, you know, typically when people say Cuddle fabric, you're talking about the flat nap. And this is another embossed. It's just a different type. And then again, your Minky is your dots. Most people call them Minky dots. Any other questions? So I would do that, and I'd go to Vanessa's. I do have a big Minky stash. I'm selling it off. What do we need Minky for? Minky's great. Oh, you missed the last live stream. Oh, you got to go watch the live stream. Go catch up, because I'm not going to reveal it here. I think it's a secret project we're not supposed to reveal. But go watch the studio cam, because it's a great project. Oh, now I lost my train of thought. What was I saying? I forgot. Oh, my stash. Yeah, I'm selling it because I've got a lot, and there's a lot of new fabrics I need to order. And I used a ton. My business is called Kelly's Cuddle Cottage, and it's because most of the items I make, I use Shannon Fabrics Cuddle for. So I buy a lot of scraps that other businesses are selling, because I use even the smallest ones for baby teethers. And so I'm in seatbelt strap cover, so I'm always using smaller pieces. So I do have a pretty big Cuddle stash. I've got a problem with it. And I have a king size Cuddle quilt I'm waiting to make for our bed too. Yeah, this studio cam was a yakathon. It went very fast yesterday, that is for sure. All right, friends, I am heading to bed. Thanks for joining me. I hope you learned something about Minky and Cuddle, and to make something. Once you make one project, you will never stop making them. You're welcome, Tish. Thanks for joining us. Adios, folks.